In this lesson, we will be learning about how musical pitches are labeled and mapped out on the keyboard. In addition to rhythm, pitch is the most important building block of many types of Western music, particularly classical music before the 20th century. Now we'll be focusing a lot more on how pitches relate to each other and form meaningful patterns. The way we name pitches or notes in English and German-speaking countries is by using the first 7 letters of the alphabet, adding the words flat and sharp to access the other 5 notes of what we call the chromatic scale. And that's the set of 12 different pitches on which most Western music is based. The letters we use are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. In German, you sometimes see H too. Other languages will use syllables like do, re, mi, and fa from the solfege system to name pitches. Feel free to use whatever is most comfortable for you. Through the rest of our lessons, we'll use the English letter name system. This graphic shows the layout of keys on the piano. We'll be using the piano quite a bit here since the keys that correspond to each pitch are easy to see. It's not like a violin, where you just have to know where to put your fingers, or wind and brass instruments that rely on mouth positions and complicated fingerings. And here are the keys with their labels. Notice how the black keys have 2 names. Because the white keys get the standard letter names, we use sharp and flat to get to the black ones. Yes, the sharp looks like a hashtag and the flat looks like an odd B. Just add sharp to any letter name and you'll get the key just to the right, or to the ear, a little higher, than the white key with that letter name. If you add flat to any letter name, you'll go 1 key to the left, or the one that sounds just a little lower. And yes, sometimes you can get a white key with a sharp or flat name. Like if we start on B, then say we want B sharp. Well, the key immediately to the right of B is C. It's still a white key, but in certain contexts, we may need to call it B sharp. This situation is pretty rare though. For a quick visual cue to find your way around the keyboard, look for the groups of 2 and groups of 3 black keys. The white key to the left of the 2 black note groups is always C, and the key to the left of the 3 black note groups is F. Staff notation, treble clef. Now we're going to start working with a musical staff. We have already learned something about how rhythm is notated, but for now, we will be focusing on how the staff shows pitch content, because this is really important for reading music on almost any instrument. Treble clef. First, we'll be looking at the treble clef and how it indicates pitches in the upper half of the piano's range. Some of the other instruments that use treble clef are violins, flutes, clarinets, female and some male voices, classical guitars, trumpets, saxophones, and much more. Here's a treble clef. What on earth is a clef then? Well, the word clef comes from the Latin word for key, clave. Like a house key, it unlocks the range of notes we'll be looking for on a particular staff. Since the staff only has 5 lines on it, which means we have 5 lines and 4 spaces between them, there's not nearly enough space to put all the notes we use onto one staff. Treble just means high, so in the treble clef you'll expect to see and read somewhat high notes. The way clefs work is that they indicate where one landmark note will go on the staff. This note corresponds to 1 pitch or 1 key on the piano, not like how the letter names work, repeating once every octave. Each clef will mark the placement of its particular landmark note, and then you can read the locations of the other notes in relation to it. The treble clef marks where the G above middle C is. Basically, if you sit down at a piano and sit right at the middle of the keyboard, this particular G will be almost exactly in front of you. It sounds like this. The treble clef marks this particular G by curling around the second line from the bottom on its staff. The G above middle C then will always be notated on that line when using treble clef. Well, hundreds of years ago you could move the treble clef or any other clef wherever you wanted on the staff to show where you wanted G to be. You probably won't see G clefs in any other positions these days. Just for a cool historical tidbit, here's a graphic showing the evolution of what G clefs looked like from about 500 years ago to today. So now that we know where G is when we are using treble clef, we can then figure out where all the other notes will fall in relation to it. Each line in each space represents one white key on the piano. As we discussed in Lesson 1, the black keys are accessed by using sharp and flat signs, so you can count up and down from that G to find every other note that the treble clef will cover. Note that the first C in this series is just off the staff, instead using its own little line. This is called a ledger line, and we will talk about those in a bit. Here's another way to show vertically which note will occupy each space and line. You might like to think of line notes versus space notes as well to make everything easier to remember and to have more landmark notes at your disposal. So here are the line notes and the space notes of the treble staff. The space notes just spell out face, so that's pretty easy to remember. For E, G, B, D, F, there's a very popular mnemonic used to remember it. Every good boy does fine. Or you can feel free to make up your own or not use mnemonics at all and just use the landmark G to find your way around. Musical example. Let's revisit one of the examples from our first lesson, Mary Had a Little Lamb. While we were talking about rhythm in that lesson, we can now add a new layer of understanding to this song. It hangs around that landmark G. First, as it plays, can you find each of the G's in this song? Yes, the word had is sung on a G both times, and there is also a G at the very end, on snow. Now, knowing where G is, can you identify what note the first syllable of Mary is sung on, beginning the song? Yes, it's a B. It is the next line above G. Remember that E, G, B, D, F are the notes on the lines. So then, how about the note on the space in between B and G with the syllables re and a, and later, little Liam? Well, what comes after G and before B in the musical alphabet? Yup, it's A. See how we can use the landmarks we know? First the G and then that B right in the middle to find our way around, as long as we know which clef we're using and what landmark that clef establishes for us. Now, there's one note left for us to identify in this song. It's that higher note used at the end of the first line over little lamb. Since it's on a line, you can either use the line notes mnemonic or count up from G and B. What's this note? Yes, it's D. Now we'll continue our study of staff notation by looking at the bass clef. As you might have guessed from the word bass, like a bass guitar or a jazz bass, the bass clef is used to notate pitches in the lower half of the piano's range and for lower pitched instruments like cellos, double basses, bassoons, trombones, tubas, and low male voices. Here's a bass clef. Rather than marking where G is, as the treble clef does, it marks the location of the F below middle C. It sounds like this. Though originally an F clef could be placed wherever you wanted, today it is placed such that the two dots go above and below, thus marking the F line. Here's the evolution of the bass clef over several centuries. The landmark system works in the same way as it does with treble clefs. Each line and space represents one letter name with sharps and flats used to access the black key notes. As with a treble clef, you may find it easier to group all these notes into line notes and space notes, or you may just use F and the bottom G as landmarks. Here are the line notes and space notes. Some of the popular mnemonics for these are, for space notes, all cows eat grass, and for line notes, good boys do fine always. But of course, you'll remember these much more easily by making up your own catchy mnemonics. Ledger lines and middle C. As you may have noticed earlier in this lesson, not every note on the piano fits into the lines and spaces of the grand staff. In order to expand the range of each staff, we use small extra lines called ledger lines. These work the same way as the standard lines and spaces do. They simply continue the progression of letter names represented by each consecutive line and space. Here's an illustration starting from G on top of the treble staff. One of the most common and important ledger line notes we'll encounter is middle C. This is the C closest to the middle of the piano keyboard, though these days it's not quite in the middle anymore, since we've expanded the keyboard's range a bit since staff notation came into existence. On both the treble and bass staves, middle C will sit on a single ledger line just off the staff. In treble clef, middle C lies one ledger line below the staff, and in bass clef, it sits one ledger line above the staff. It looks like a little planet. Thanks so much for tuning in for Lesson 2, and see you soon for Lesson 3.